Perfect. Thank you so much, Ron. So quick introduction. So Virsec is a US-based company. Our headquarters is in San Jose, California. We're venture capitalists backed by John Chambers or JC2, and the company's raised $137 million to date. Our customers include everything from Fortune 500s, financials, healthcare, and obviously PubSec. And I'll talk about PubSec in terms of state and local government, US military, and a number of agencies as well. So this topic is a little bit provocative in terms of stop tomorrow's 0 days attack. So I want to get into the details really quickly, but just to set the stage here, the reason why 0 days and 1 day vulnerabilities are becoming so dominant in the social as well as in the CVSS scores is that they've seen a rise of 143% since last year. And this rise of 0 days and 1 days is extremely problematic, both to CEOs, CISOs with incredibly complex reporting structures, but also from the standpoint of securing applications and making sure that your runtime environment is actually clear. So what we've seen is that one of the factors that lead to this is this concept of dwell time. Just so everybody's on the same level playing field, dwell time is key in terms of it is a metric that defines the time between an attacker's initial penetration into your organization and when you actually find it out. So all during that time, which is now, as Mandiant reports, is an average of 16 days. And as an industry, we're very proud of getting that down from 21 days. But that's still 16 days that a robber is in your house looking whether to set traps, steal something, do whatever they want to do. And this is where 0 days and 1 days get planted. The impact of this is that ransomware itself and malware really only have milliseconds to actually detonate. And when we look at the types of attacks that are evolving to get to this state, what we see is 7 out of the 10 most exploited, or usually exploited vulnerabilities are remote code executions. To the earlier presenter, yes, identity actually helps a lot from a human to machine perspective or human to application. But when we see these application to application environments, we really want to look at something that's independent of identity, to have that second wall, or from a defense in depth strategy perspective, that second layer of support to prevent these. And the nefarious thing about remote code executions is that their mean time to exploit is very quick. So once the system has been bypassed, and we all know now that 16 days of somebody's looking around in your house to actually exploit, they see something really nice, and all of a sudden, within 500 milliseconds to about 6.4 seconds, boom, ransomware, you're encrypted. Malware, they're actually exfiltrating with your data. It happens that quickly. So why this is extremely problematic is that EDRs, or the current technology today, is underserving the server market. So when we look at the endpoint detection and response layer, here at Virsec, we would advocate a separation of duty between mobile devices and laptop devices and servers. The reason being is because of this. As Verizon Data Breach Report has reported now for third year in a row, servers are the #1 IT asset that result in data breaches. In fact, 80% of them. And the double click down is the entry point is web applications. So if we know that this is the target and the technique is remote code executions, and we have a couple of milliseconds or seconds to actually prevent it, what do we do? How do we actually stop that? When we look at the MITRE approach, and as was presented earlier, the tactics and techniques from an execution, persistence, privilege escalation, all of this entire set of tactics and techniques lead to a kill chain. What we've seen in our tests is where the current technology, endpoint detection and response, because they're relying on a behavioral match, an indication of compromise, an IOC, they need a signature. And if there is no signature, which is merely just a representation of the tactics and techniques that are used to infiltrate and then weaponize and then exploit a vulnerability, when we see that a new set of tactics and techniques are used, an EDR doesn't know what to do with it. There's no signature. There's no indication of compromise. It takes an EDR, we've heard various figures, hours, days, weeks to actually accumulate that signature or indication of compromise. And when we test against the current environments, unknown indicators, that is there is no signature in place to actually respond to it, the performance against these types of attacks with leading EDRs, and I won't name anybody, but we can, if anybody wants to ping me, I'll definitely share the individual results. They're really bad. In fact, now there's actually books written on how to bypass EDRs. So this is actually getting worse. So if you think you're protected, kind of think again. So when we look at Virsec, knowing that this is a public sector crowd, we actually participated in a very comprehensive hackathon with 218 ethical hackers broken into 7 teams. What we see is that over 14,000 hacking attempts, predominantly around remote code executions, such as malware and ransomware were attempted. Virsec scored 100%. And be clear, this is a military environment. What we were protecting was the simulation of a military ship, a destroyer, if you will. So what we protected against was an attack on all different levels to your application to get your data and to exfiltrate with that information. Virsec security platform prevented 100%, a perfect score. It had never been done before. So with this, so how does Virsec security platform actually improve your security posture? Well, what we advocate for is zero trust runtime defense. So as your application comes up online, it'll actually have a series of dependencies, whether that be libraries, whether it be scripts, whether it be processes, files, dynamic links, and it'll actually need those to be able to run. That is the moment in time where many of these remote code executions become extremely vulnerable exceed the vulnerability that's in the application and start to exploit it. So what Virsec security platform does is we provide continuous protection. That is we are a probe-based system. We use the word probe because it's lightweight. It's between 200 and 600 megs as compared to some of the agents out there at 2 gigs or more. So by putting this lightweight probe out there, it can actually take action. It can actually kill a malicious process if needed to be. But our approach is deny all, allow based on trust, which is fundamental to the zero trust architecture. No explicit trust and assume breach. So if you assume breach and you're allowing everything in like an EDR to look for a signature, you're already behind on timing. The incident's already happened and now you're looking to clean up and triage. The other thing that Virsec does very well within the same probe is to allow web application support. So think of it as a inline software tap. It's looking at all the HTTP traffic coming to your application externally. And what we'll do is we'll put guardrails up along the payload. So if somebody's trying to insert malicious code through an XML injection or trying to attack the business logic with, hey, give me an asterisk, return all passwords, we can set up those guardrails so an SQL injection will actually not ever be executed, again, by application control and allow listing. And very common is the ability to have a compliant security mitigating or compensating control. So Virsec security platform is based on NIST 800-53, which equates to CISO. And for those that are looking at PCI, DSS type environments, we can support those type of assessments with the mitigating control. But the use case here is one, first and foremost, legacy applications. And so as applications such as Microsoft Exchange 2012 go end of support last month, what we see is an increase of, hey, do I want to pay for the one-time patch at 1.5 to 2 times the original price of the server? Or do I want a mitigating control to prevent vulnerabilities from being exploited? A lot of our customers are choosing to have a compensating control in place. The other typical use case is patching. Very good patching mechanisms out there today. The challenge we see and continually hear is that the volume, variety, and velocity is just too high. And if we see the average time cycle to actually have a patch in place of 20 to 50 days, what we see is let's have a mitigating control until we can patch. So it's not in conflict to patching. It's saying patch on your own terms and make sure you go through the test and QA and make sure there's no unintended consequences. So providing this runtime protection for the infrastructure layer, that is your host OS, your VM, your container, your runtime environment, the application support, and providing compliance with evidence to provide that for auditors, etc. Virsec can help secure and improve your security posture dramatically against 0 days and 1 day attacks. So typically where we fit in is the application workload. You'll see that from a zero trust architecture perspective, the majority of the industry, particularly around endpoint detection response, are heavy on the user devices and network. I worked at Cisco for 13 years, very proud of that fact. But again, zero trust has this principle of assume breach. They've already got your user identity. They're already inside of your network. So, best case, maybe microsegment and try to limit the explosion, the detonation around there. But with Virsec, we protect the application and workload with our advanced probe. We provide automation. We integrate with your change management, so it's released on your software cycles. And we provide that visibility, analytics, and observability back to your environment, whether that's through integration with your SIEM or SOAR or directly from our console. Within that, we also see that there's this dotted line. That's to say that within the web application, we actually do not do the things in gray here. What Virsec Security Platform provides is a way to what we call bytecode instrumentation for Java applications. We insert the instrumentation, so any ingress or egress, infiltration, exfiltration of nefarious traffic will be tagged and will never be executed. So we prevent the access to and from the application rather than this approach. Just to say we do it, but we do it differently. So what we advocate for, as I mentioned earlier, is really adding this concept of trust intelligence to your threat intelligence architecture. That is add protection to your detection response. So detection response is good for mobile devices, for laptops where you've got to bring your own application. You've got a very dynamic environment. But a more stable environment like a server workload environment is not protected by an EDR today. So again, by having an allow list of what is authorized in terms of files, processes, scripts, libraries, etc., we'll do a discovery and automate a significant portion of this. And I understand there's first generation users out there and wondering, hey, Bit9 and Carbon Black, etc. We've solved a number of those challenges and would welcome the opportunity to prove it to you. So the separation of duty is, again, addressing that 80% of where data breaches are actually happening on your server workload. It addresses a very fast millisecond malware mean time to exploit, and it's preventing that 0 day by only allowing what has been authorized to execute at runtime. The analogy I like to give is a sporting event, and that is if you go to pick your favorite, soccer, football, basketball, hockey, whatever the case might be, you present your ticket and you go down, you present it, you go down to your seat, you enjoy the game, you go back to your family, talk about how wonderful it was, or if they're there, you celebrate with them. And that is the protection world. That is, your ticket is your authorized allow list. That's your authorization. In an EDR world, they'll let all 40,000 people into the arena. And then every usher will start to go, are you in seat A1? Are you in seat A1? And try and figure, is there a match inside of here, which is generating a significant amount of false positives. And you're left with an indication of compromise. Well, that was 23% of something that happened 2 years ago. Is that a breach or not a breach, or what is it? Here, it's very deterministic. It's either yes or no. It's authorized or not, and only those things that have been authorized will be allowed to run. That is how we prevent 0 days. Anything extraneous to the allow list will never have an opportunity to run. A little bit of a technical slide, but to keep everybody up to date, again, our architecture is one where the CMS, and we definitely need a cooler name, but central management system is your centralized dashboard. But this is where the API and webhooks to your SIEM, your SOAR, or enterprise dashboard will happen. If you want to use this more in a localized world, you can absolutely do that. But this is aggregating all the incident ID, log information, etc., from your continuous probe that's monitoring your application and workload. There's your virtual machine, your container. And within there, we prevent the OAuth, the application support. We have the authorized allow list. The trust intelligence happens from various numbers of lookups. From the lowest being sandbox. We don't know what this thing is. Let's put it in a sandbox. You can have a third-party sandbox and quarantine it for a while. To the very highest, we want provenance back to the ISV, and we want to actually know what build process this actually came from or package manager. And if you're happy with that certificate, then you can automatically allow that in day 2 operations to make continuous application support. As well, within the single probe, we also have memory exploit prevention and buffer overflow prevention for those people that are directly attacking your workload. So with one single probe, there's support for both Windows as well as Linux, being CentOS, Red Hat, and Ubuntu, web application support, runtime environment, as well as memory, all from one consolidated probe. So within there, our application is, again, default deny, allow based on trust. That's the way transportation works. That's the way sports works. You have a ticket, you get in. You get to see what's going on. So trust only known good. When you look at what's out on your server workload, perhaps some IT organizations don't actually know what's running. Many actually know nothing about the application in their workload, which are 2 different layers. But if we look at it as known good code, we look for signed files and trusted publishers. And if you're fine with, for example, Microsoft signing your certificate, then you can look at your MSI folder and the files and processes inside of there. And if you're comfortable with that, you can automatically allow list it and keep everything running smoothly. On the other side is if you look up, say, with a reputation service, say with Reversing Labs, for example, and you see that this is known bad, it's been documented that this has a known CWE vulnerability or it's been malicious, then that's easy, just block it. This big gap in between the unknown, that is where there's 10 steps within Virsec that will try to derive provenance as well as validation for that. And if you're comfortable with that, you can insert authorization for that to actually run. The point being is in your workload and in your application, you want trust intelligence that only known good processes, files, scripts, and libraries will actually run in your environment. So if we look at a classic example, something like Log4j, we can look at Volt Typhoon, we can look at a number of different exploits. Classic kill chain coming down through here, performing recon, looking at infiltration, grabbing some credentials, persistence, kind of looking around during that dwell time of what to actually do, then weaponize it, get a backdoor so I can actually exploit and then exfiltrate as well, but weaponize that vulnerability and then exploit it. This is where the performance of that exploitation is milliseconds or seconds. As you can see, Virsec with both application, runtime, and memory support will actually prevent the infiltration up front from actually accessing that application, will prevent persistence, whether it be lateral movement or other activities within the organization, will prevent a file system monitoring of actually weaponizing or planting the malware inside, and then will prevent the actual exploitation because it's not in the allow list. So multi-layer support across your workloads and application environments. So within that, the kind of care about is in today's financial reality, when we look and speak to our customers, no one's adding in another layer without taking something out. So there's a huge focus in on this bottom one, tools consolidation. I'm happy to work with you to look at, hey, why do you have that EDR running on your server workload if it's only basically doing triage and log support after an incident? We can look at RAS, we can look at WAFs as well. A lot of different ways to look at tools consolidation or even projects. With Virsec, we've got several customers that have bypassed budget from a micro segmentation and gone with Virsec instead. So love to work with you in terms of that. Operational efficiencies, several of our customers have reduced human capital by taking those folks. In one case, 9 folks were looking at vulnerability analysis. Once in protection mode with Virsec security platform, that went down to one person half-time just looking at the incident ID from Virsec as your single source of truth. Lots of different ways to prevent money, both from a soft cost perspective as well as hard dollars in terms of your CPU cycle and storage space for an EDR and their agents that are required. We can pull that back in terms of those costs from a CPU and storage perspective. So with that, just going to leave you a couple of different resources inside of here. Sorry, I see everybody's got QR codes. I should have done it that way. My apologies. Feel free. There's only one Mark Milinkovich at Virsec, so happy to reach out and answer to any questions you might have. But thank you very much for your time today. So Virsec is preventing 0 days and 1 day attacks with zero trust runtime protection.